Hello, guys. I'm going to walk through helping you prep for your timed essay that will take up a substantial part of your final. You're going to have 45 minutes to develop specs and analysis in relation to a thesis that you develop. The best way to prep for this is to actually practice writing the prompt ahead of time. You're not able to use it on the final, but it will make you feel more comfortable going into that time setting and getting rid of some of the anxiety and stress that comes with that type of activity. So, the question that you're focusing on is what factors contributed to the development of civilization of Western Europe up through the Middle Ages? Majority of your focus will be around Greece and Rome, and you will have a couple aspects of the early Middle Ages that you'll focus on as well. The idea of what you're trying to prove is that first, you're trying to show that civilization evolved and changed over the course of many centuries, and you're trying to prove that there are many factors that played to this change. Now, for the cusp of this essay, I'm actually helping you with the location of your evidence, and we'll talk about that first. But after we talk about evidence collection, it's really important that you understand you should also practice developing your thesis, because you're going to notice that I'm not giving you the thesis, I'm giving you a question. So your job is to actually, each person's thesis might be a little different depending on what evidence you choose for specific categories. So the only thing you're allowed the day of the final is the evidence that will help you formulate your thesis, and that's it. So you can have pieces of evidence pulled and collected to fill the categories below, but everything else you will complete on the spot. Now, I want to make clear that all specs must come from the work done in this class. They must come from readings, from worksheets, anything we've done in this class in regards to practice and preparation. We've really focused on this question. I may change it a little bit in each of the units. Like I may have said, how did, ancient Rome, how did this topic of ancient Rome impact the development of Western Europe? But it has been part of our conversation since the beginning. So in order to show that learning that you've done, you have to use all class related materials, and your citations can be dependent on the document that you choose. If it has a official MLA citation, you should cite it in that regards. If it's from, a worksheet that you did, like your 2-column note, text in the page number. If it's from a video, the title of the video, whatever piece. But I just want to make it clear you're not allowed to use Google to find information, because this is a reflection of your learning. All right, so you will be required to use 7 pieces of evidence for the prompt. You're going to notice that there's 8 pieces that I'm asking you to collect. The day of the final, you'll have a choice of your last piece of evidence, I'm not going to tell you ahead of time, but I'm just going to say prep for all 8 pieces and be ready, and know that you're only doing 7 of them. So the first week of the trimester, we actually talked about factors that help to develop a civilization. And we talked about categories such as political, social, military, infrastructural. We talked about it could be a plethora of types of factors that develop civilizations. And what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to collect evidence for each of the major units of study that would fulfill showing that something about that civilization influenced the development of Western Europe. And you have to think in your mind, first, what is a civilization? Go back to the definitions we did in the first week of class. And 2, how was that topic that you had something that would be far reaching and not just something that may have only helped in the moment, but eventually fell apart? So for ancient Greece, what I'm going to ask you to do is I want the political factor, and I'd like you to focus on the formation of direct democracy. So in your evidence collection, you're going to want to find evidence that supports the idea that direct democracy influenced the development of Western Europe in some regards. It can be a definition, it can be a statistic, but if I were to find evidence, for instance, that in such and such BC, Cleisthenes developed direct democracy, which set up the Athenian assembly where all male citizens had the right to vote. If that's my specs, my analysis would then need to explain by developing this political system, it was a factor that developed Western Europe because it created a new form of government that for a time gave people a right to have a say in government that wasn't just based on wealth, which would influence later civilizations into the ideology of democracy. So you're kind of drawing some connections with the specs that you choose and how it influences your thesis. Your evidence might be a definition, it might be a specific fact, but really think in your brain, was this a factor that developed civilization? Is it something that was beyond just the time period? And that may help you in your discussion. So in the next one, I'm giving you a choice: social or cultural development about Greece. It can be mathematics, religion, science, gender roles, something that you think helped in the development of Western Europe. I would encourage maybe thinking mathematics or science, because sometimes that is far reaching in its choice, and you could probably find a theory. The development of an arena, for instance, by the Greeks for theater is definitely still utilized in civilizations. It formulates the idea of theater. They were the first to create it. The Pythagorean theorem is a theorem that would be used to help in architecture for Western Europe and generations to come, etc. And then military and social, you decide the specs, but I want it to be something in relation to Alexander and the Hellenistic culture. Once again, it's pretty wide open. You can decide where you want to go with that. I say military because of his conquests, but if you want to focus on the Hellenistic culture and the expansion of the creation of things like libraries, the expansion of Greek ideas into other parts of the world, that can be definitely something you focus on. For ancient Rome, I want your political once again. You'll notice political is a theme for all three of the units. So, definitely in your thesis, we'll talk about you definitely want the word political. I want something about the Roman Republic and representative democracy. Then for B, Roman military expansion. So, talking about how they expanded into other parts of Europe with their aqueducts, their roads, anything like that. So, it can be military conquest or military building. Remember, they also built parts of Europe. The Roman project, it's a topic of your choice, but it cannot be your own topic that you research. So you took those notes as your classmates presented, and it will be any of their topics that you can utilize for your specs and analysis. For the Middle Ages, feudalism, I'd like you to focus on that. Really thinking about how feudalism, I know our learning of it was quick, but thinking about how that brought stability back to Europe and how that was a factor that kind of re-civilized Western Europe after the collapse of Rome when you do your analysis statement. And then for your last topic, you're going to choose, and this will be based on what you were assigned, either castles, knights, nobles, or it should be serfs. Whichever category you were given, that will be your focus for your choice of topic to talk about how that group or that or castles help to influence Western Europe. And we have that as a driving question. So that you're going to have 8 pieces of evidence, 1 specs for each of the letters that you see listed below. Okay. And I know it sounds strange, but it's literally 1 worksheet. You might find something. It should come from something that you did, though, and not just you opening the textbook and finding a specs based on something we haven't learned about. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is, after you collect all this evidence, what should you do next? My suggestion would be to formulate your thesis statement. So if we look at the question above, what factors contributed to the development of Western civilization of Western Europe up through the Middle Ages? So to formulate your thesis, you would say there were many political, and then depending on what you choose down here, you could say architectural, religious, whatever your topics are. So you would say like religious, military, um, depending on architectural, depending on the words that you come across, factors that contributed to the development. And what you're doing is, when you go to write your paragraphs, you will associate, whenever you talk about the republic, democracy, or feudalism, you'll associate to political. You'll say this was a political factor that developed Rome because. If it's something to do with religion, you would say this was a religious factor. So it associates to your thesis in that regards. I know this may seem a little confusing, but hopefully when we talk about it in class, it'll make a little more sense and it will help you better prepare. My suggestion, though, is to collect your evidence with each of these categories in mind. And as you collect the evidence, ask yourself this: how is the specs that I chose a political factor that helped to develop Western Europe up through the Middle Ages? Okay? And I hope with each of these sections it helped you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me, but I hope this gives you a little bit of indication of what you're doing for the final. Good luck.